Hey everyone, before we get into today's video, answering your questions to start off our year on the right financial foot, I just wanted to hop in with a quick reminder that if one of your goals or intentions for 2025 was to explore working with a professional on your finances, I personally use a financial advisor and I highly recommend speaking with one. We here at TFD partner with advisor.com. They offer a flat fee advising service, which means it's more financially accessible and it is completely transparent and based on their work for you, not for commissions. If you use the link in our description to set up a completely free introductory call with them, you will also get an exclusive $500 off of your first year. And even just the call itself, I think, is really worth taking because there's just a lot to talk about with a financial advisor, especially going into a pretty intimidating year with a brand new, but I guess not that new president. Anyway, Happy New Year. Take care of your finances. Let's answer some questions.
Hi everyone, it's Chelsea and I am here. I'm actually in France. I'm here for a long day's journey into night. I'm here for a couple months over the holidays and for my and my husband's birthday, seeing friends, family, etc. And also filming videos because you know what I'm never not doing is making content. I'm making content constantly. But more importantly, we wanted to start the year with a Q&A answering some of your most pressing questions and just kind of having a little heart-to-heart rap session. As we've said before, I'm the youth counselor. As someone who used to go to Young Life, I'm very familiar with the youth counselor stance. We're flipping the chair around, hats going on backwards. We're just here to talk. So we asked you guys to send in your questions to kick off our year, and I'm gonna answer just a few. Someone asks, what happened to the Financial Confessions podcast? Several question marks. So we retired that podcast for now because we do all of our podcasts now for our members and we do different like mini podcast series. So we did one about like Gilmore Girls, Sex and the City. We did one about influencer culture. We've done one about politics. We've got several coming up this year. We're starting off the year. I'm doing another political one post-inauguration with our political contributor, Anna Gifty. I believe we're doing one on Girls, the TV series. I think we have a few coming up on different, like I think we're going to do one on Love is Blind and reality dating shows. We're going to do one about, I think, K-pop. I'm not personally a K-pop person, but several of the women in our office are very into like K-pop and K-dramas. So we might do a deep dive on that. That's been very requested amongst our staff. Also, my husband is always watching K-dramas, so I sort of have absorbed it by osmosis. And I know there's a lot of interesting things to unpack financially about Korean pop culture, so we might do that. But anyway, suffice to say, we have a lot of really interesting podcasts coming up. We're also probably going to have, I don't know if you guys saw, but our Gilmore Girls podcast was with YouTuber Princess Weeks, who's a friend of ours, and we're just a fan of everything she does. And she's probably going to come back to do either more content for YouTube or more podcasts or both. So a lot of cool stuff is coming up on the channel. But yeah, we retired the main one for now because we wanted to focus on our member podcasts about different topics. I'm in a very expensive city and dating again. Advice on handling having a tighter budget than most. Well, first of all, you're a lady asking this. So if you're dating men, squeeze those pockets for all they're worth, baby. No, I'm kidding. There's an episode of the podcast that I'm going to recommend and we'll link in the description. Me and my friend talked about needing to sort of rethink the finances of dating because I do think that there is just a very broken discourse around it. I think the expectations for men in hetero couples are sometimes really outlandish. Like there's a lot of talk about like, oh, don't accept coffee dates, don't accept walking dates. It's only like, 5-star restaurants and, these really expensive things. There's actually, I don't know if anyone watched Love is Blind Habibi, but I was seated for that. And there's a woman on the show, Noor, who was like very forward about having those kind of expectations. And the way they all treated her for having those expectations, I found to be abhorrent because there's, I think, this kind of simultaneous expectation of sort of men being a provider. And then when a woman steps out and says, hey, I actually really want these things, that's also kind of viewed poorly. Suffice to say, there are a lot of expectations that are unrealistic financially. There are also a lot of really outdated gender norms, especially in hetero dating. And I don't know if this person is a woman dating men, but all of that is to say, I think first and foremost, it's very important to just be very transparent about budgets in the early stages of dating a person. And I think that's just kind of true regardless of the actual dates themselves. Like you don't necessarily need to be like sharing your tax returns on the first date, but I do think it's very important to have a level of transparency about your budgets, about, what your realistic expectations are, because I think almost everything in dating and relationships that we consider to be more sort of lifestyle or romantically based decisions, like, living together, having children, getting married, all of these things are financial decisions at the end of the day. And most of them have a price tag associated. So I think being open. I also think being creative. Now, generally speaking, if you live in a high cost of living city, one of the benefits of that is that there are usually a lot of things to do in the city that are free or inexpensive, especially for city residents. Things like museums, galleries, cultural activities. Really, here in New York, we have, back in New York, we have like gorgeous libraries. We have, beautiful public parks, skating rinks. Like, there are just tons of things to do a lot of times that don't cost money and yet don't feel like for me personally, if someone were to ask me on a first date to go for a walk, as someone who walks 10,000 steps a day, I would be like, this is not a date. This is just simply not a date. This is the way to get to a date, but it doesn't have to be expensive, but there's no sort of thought or creativity or anything special about it. So I would say first and foremost, lean in to what is both affordable and special. I would say be transparent about, your own finances and your sort of financial expectations of dating. And also understand that if you're feeling the pinch financially, that chances are that many of the people that you're dating are as well, and try to break free of really oppressive gender norms about who pays. Because, I'm loath to have empathy for men, but I imagine them sitting at these, expensive restaurants and the bill comes and they're like, because I've certainly been there and I've known what it's felt like to be like, I literally don't know if I have enough in my checking account to cover this bill. And the other people at the table went rogue ordering apps and sides and drinks. And now I'm expected to split it. So that would be my answer. Would you suggest working with a life coach after receiving a windfall of money? First of all, congratulations on the money. Second of all, absolutely not. This is maybe anecdotal, but I believe it's true. All of the worst people I've encountered in my life personally, not all, but a lot of the worst people in my life have since become life coaches. A lot of them are LinkedIn warriors posting, and it often conflates with a lot of other scammy MLM adjacent things. I think that there can be all kinds of coaches who are not like, for example, if you got a windfall of cash, I would highly recommend working with a financial advisor. And there can be other non-financial advisors. Like, I have had experiences with career advisors that I found incredibly helpful. I have friends who career coaches have changed their life, for your fitness coaches, dietitians. There are all kinds of people that I think can be incredibly additive to how you live your life and have tons to teach you that aren't purely financial. And the good thing about a windfall is you can likely afford their exorbitant fees. Dating coaches even. I met my husband when I was 22, so I was, I wasn't really overlapping with being able to afford a dating coach, but I've heard good things about certain dating coaches as well. But I think the very sort of nebulous, generalized life coach stuff really just always gives scam to me, because I don't really know what that means. And I think no one is knowledgeable enough on an interdisciplinary level to be a coach for the entire act of living. I just don't believe that that's possible. Also, I'm going to continue to generalize here and say that most of the people I know who became life coaches, I don't know that they're necessarily living life to the fullest. A lot of them going to Burning Man, a lot of them engaging in, again, online scammery, MLM type things, maybe not necessarily professionally or personally living their best lives. So I highly discourage you from seeking out a life coach. But if there are specific things in your life that you want to work on, I think finding trusted, competent, professional advisors in that space can be very helpful. They've been helpful to me. And listen, I say this as someone who's into astrology. So Lord knows I'm not completely anti anything that's woo-woo. I just think the very specific niche of a life coach, never buy it. How to deal with non-negotiable job offers. Don't negotiate. I don't know. It sounds like you either have to take it or say no to it, right? Like, doesn't sound like there's a whole lot to deal with other than, are you taking it or not? That being said, I know there are certain non-negotiable job offers in the sense that, like, the amount that you will be paid or your compensation package is dependent on things like union rates. Public servants are often not able to negotiate in that way. Like, there are certain jobs that are just kind of non-negotiable by nature, and usually come with other benefits. But if it is like a private sector non-union job where, like, theoretically this is a company that could have a lot more discretion and they're making it explicitly non-negotiable, my question would be why? And is that a red flag for other things at the company? Best app for beginner investors. I think that's where robo-advisors come in. I started getting into investing via using a robo-advisor. Full disclosure, the one that we work with is Betterment on our YouTube video essays. But in general, I think apps that help sort of automate and demystify the process of investing is just the best stepping stone for total beginners, and that's what I use personally. Secondhand furniture question, where did you get your tweed couch? So cute. It's from a company called Article. It's definitely a great couch. Although with tweed, just a note for fabric couches is you either want to invest in like an actual upholstery cleaner or budget in getting your upholstery cleaned at least once a year because fabric couches can just get dirty and dingy and stinky and bad. It's called Article. There's a website that I like to use for buying secondhand furniture called Apartment Deco. And so I didn't get this one there because it was for we had very specific requirements for a move, but in general, there's a ton of Article and other brand couches. I've gotten like a Crate and Barrel thing from Apartment Deco. So I highly recommend looking there if you don't have a super specific requirement or sense of urgency for secondhand furniture. And of course, Facebook Marketplace. How to feel safer investing after you already made an emergency fund. Constantly remind yourself that from an inflation perspective, an emergency fund is the worst thing to do with your money. You need to do it. It needs to be there in cash and available to you. It's the definition of an emergency fund. If you have your emergency fund tied up in the market, you might have to take it out during a downtime and it could be a horrible outcome. So kind of by definition, a time-sensitive thing like an emergency fund needs to be available liquid in a regular, ideally high yield savings account. But know that that is like the most unproductive thing you can do with your money and you just have to do it. But that in general, especially given the pace of inflation, like keeping your money even in a high yield savings account is nowhere near as effective as putting it in the market and investing it. And just try and think more in terms of opportunity costs. Sometimes something that can be helpful is using online calculators to see what a certain amount saved over a certain amount of time looks like in a high yield savings account versus based on average market returns. And that can also be helpful. But just remember that the concept of safety when it comes to money, I think is often for our little human brains that aren't built to understand things like investing and compound interest in the market. We tend to think of safe as like an almost sort of hoarding response and whatever is like closest or most available to us. But in general, with, long-term wealth building, that's kind of the opposite of what we want to do. What are your goals in 2025 as far as political canvassing and civic engagement? So, a lot of what I really want to focus on in 2025 is, first of all, voter engagement. I think, speaking as someone who is broadly on the left, although, I have nothing but criticisms for the Democratic Party, and a lot of my political engagement is either applying pressure to the Democratic Party or working with alternatives to it. I think there's often a ton of focus on converting or winning back Republicans. And there is some validity to that, right? Like there are Obama, Trump, Biden, Trump voters, clearly. Like there are people who flip-flop. And usually those are often many of the same people who are deciding swing states. But I do think that what we often don't even take into account is just the massive amount of people who don't vote. And some of those people are totally alienated from the process and have no interest. But also some of those people just like can't get time off work, don't know where their voting station is, aren't registered to vote, don't know really anything about what's going on in the ballot, don't have a ride, don't have someone to cover their shift. And I think that that is an important place to focus. I also, I do want to get a little bit more local this year. As many of you probably know, New York City is addicted to having the worst mayors in the country. Currently, we have Eric Adams, who is just a walking catastrophe. And a lot of the city, I actually have a very, very good friend who is a public servant now in New Jersey, but probably coming back to New York soon, but historically in the city of New York. So I've always been kind of up close listening to what it's really like sort of managing a city as massive and global as New York from sort of a political perspective. And I've always been a little, I guess, more interested in higher sort of more national level political engagement. But I think part of what I really learned from this election is that it's very, very important to scale down at times and think about the city that you live in. Something I often cite is that at our company, we're able to offer a very competitive maternity leave because 12 weeks of it are reimbursed at 72% by the state of New York, or 70%. That is a huge game-changing thing as a business owner, as an employee. Like, it makes the state comparatively great to live in as a parent and as an employer of parents. And that's a question of policy. That's a question of state policy. And I think, you know, the fact that so many of us, similar to people who don't vote at all, the fact that so many of us reach a crescendo of political interest every 4 years or even during congressional elections, and yet kind of neglect the things that are going on around us, it's something I feel guilty of too. And like, for example, the fact that we are once again ceding all of the progress that we had made in outdoor dining, bike lanes, pedestrian quality of life, all of that, back to parking spots again. That's like an immediate kind of quality of life issue here in the city of New York. Also in the city of New York, it's going to be important to provide a lot of resources that are going to be under siege at a national level. So voter engagement is a big one for me, and getting a little bit more local is also something that's important to me. But I do think, you know, the numbers around things like political and sort of televised news viewership have tanked after the election. And I think a lot of people are just like, screw it, I'm out. Like, I can't do this anymore. And also a sense of like, you want Trump? You got him, baby. Like, have fun with that. I don't care anymore. And I understand that impulse, but I also think that if you have in any way the bandwidth to be an engaged person, it's so important to understand. As my favorite person on, well, I see him on TikTok, but he's a New York Times columnist, to talk about politics, Jamel Bowie says, politics didn't end with Trump. There are still huge things that we can all do at all different levels. And if we just treat it as like, because of this one outcome, we're now all going to flip the Monopoly board and be like, well, I'm going to my room to watch TV. Like, that's exactly how this never gets better. Would you ever explore MLMs affecting developing countries? Yeah, so I mean, many of the, you know, capsule podcasts that we're going to be doing for members, we definitely want to explore topics that are a little bit more niche than what we would do on the main YouTube channel, and stuff like that is definitely amongst it. My best friend has a wedding coming up, and as a bridesmaid, it is going to cost somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 total, including the bachelorette trip, the wedding itself, the gifts, the travel, the outfits, etc. I simply can't afford this. How do I tell her? We get this at this point every day, questions like this ramped up in wedding season. If she is your best friend, I think one of the most important things that we have to ask ourselves when it comes to these relationships in our lives are, what do these titles functionally mean? Because if they are just sort of crowns that we bestow on people or pins that we put on their sash, that's just like, you're my best friend, and that is the title under which I see you for an indefinite amount of time, I think that sort of misses the point of the roles that these relationships are supposed to serve in our lives. And to me, one of the most defining qualities of a best friend is someone for whom your love and their love for you are not conditional on things like what you can afford, your lifestyle, you know, where you live, you know, what job you work, all of these things that more superficial friendships are likely to have judgments on or to be alienated by. So by definition, a best friend is someone that you could have an open, transparent conversation about your budget limitations. And of course, you want to express nothing but enthusiasm for wanting to be a part of her life, being so flattered to be included, all of these things, but say, listen, this is the budget I'm working with. I'm going to have to, at some level, pick and choose what I can and can't do. I don't want you to feel that that is in any way kind of a personal indictment of our relationship, but it's, you know, a boundary I have to set. A best friend, by definition, would respond not only positively, but I think probably wouldn't put you in that position to begin with, but even if they did, if you set that boundary, if you raise that flag, their response is going to be, absolutely, let's work together to figure out how you can participate in a sustainable way. If that person judges you, gets angry at you, alienates you, cuts you out of the process, makes you feel ashamed, any of those things, don't question the budget, question that friendship, question the role that that person is playing in your life. I really think as adults, and I don't know how old this person is, but I think as adults at some point we have to accept that, like, we're not here to put ourselves into debt for somebody else's special day. You are not a 3-year-old. This is not a 3-year-old's birthday party. We are going to sit you down and explain to you that we all have financial limits and that we can't be doing this. But yeah, I'm very sorry to hear that you're in that situation. At least know that you are not alone and that this happens constantly. What to do with large infusions of cash like a bonus? I typically recommend, I do the 75-25, where 25% of it you spend as you want on something fun. And then with the 75%, I allocate it to various savings or debt payoff goals. That's it. and you can prioritize those based on things like the interest rate of your debt. Do you need to touch up your emergency fund? Do you have sinking funds that need more money? Do you have, an investment account that are you maxing out your retirement accounts? All those things. So prioritize the savings and investments and do that. What energy are you entering 2025 with? I feel good. As some of you remember, 2023 was like the worst year ever for our business. And I was like, very much crashing out at the end of 2023. And I literally canceled all of my holiday plans. We were supposed to come similar to now, spend a long time in France, be with friends and family. We straight up just said, no, we cannot, did not come. We canceled everything, stayed home. And I was just incredibly depressed because I couldn't even, days I couldn't even get out of bed. I was so stressed out and upset. And we've had a great 2024, and we just had all of our end of year meetings, and they were just so delightful because it was just so much good news and the team was so happy. I'm very, very grateful for that. I'm very grateful for, the people in my life. We have our health. We are safe. I just got to spend a whole week with my nieces, which was incredibly exciting. Trying to focus on what I'm very grateful for, and also keep in mind that, there is a very, very fine line between what is materially affecting your life and what is affecting your vibes, especially when it comes to things like national level news. I am not in any way disengaging, but I am trying to be a lot more conscientious about how I consume information, because especially as we might recall from the first Trump administration, a lot of it is just a 24/7 circus of really chaotic things happening or promises being made, only some of which come to fruition. Many things that just act as huge distractions for a long time and then kind of go nowhere. And I think it's very important to get a little bit more disciplined right now about how you consume your news, what you're paying attention to, and how you are choosing to engage, because oftentimes just being on social media, reading news, scrolling Reddit, whatever the case may be, gives us the same feeling as having done something productive. But often all it does is just make us more anxious, more stressed, more unable to actually do anything productive. So for me, the combination is focus on what's very positive and what I have under my control and how well those things are going, and protect my mental health about how I consume outside information, especially things over which I don't have control, with the objective of maximizing my ability to be productive and helpful. But yeah, so those were just some of the questions that you guys sent in. We'll be doing another Q&A a little bit later in the year, and we'll probably do one with like a specific focus. I wanted this one to be just kind of general to kick us off. But we have so much exciting stuff coming for you in 2025. We had a really banner year on YouTube in 2024. We added, I think, over 160,000 new subscribers since January. Most of those coming from our feature-length video essays, which you guys have responded so positively to. And we just love being able to make every year or every month. They're like our favorite thing that we get to work on. And yeah, we're just so excited to keep bringing you cool stuff. Also, we did more than double our memberships in 2024. We want to do that again in 2025. So if you are not a member and you do want access to all of our very cool member stuff, especially our members-only podcast workshops and workbooks, which come every month, you can hit the join button below, or you can join us over on Patreon, which is also linked. But yeah, that's my little promo, and have a really, really wonderful 2025. Let's do it together. Bye, guys.